Everyone, I'm Jim Kelly, Director of the Gabelli Center for Global Security Analysis at Fordham University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here. We are delighted to be co-sponsoring this event with the Museum of American Finance, and I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the President of the Museum, David Cowan, and Kristen Aguilera, who is the Deputy Director. This is the third event that we have co-sponsored together. Back in the spring, earlier in the spring, we co-sponsored Professor Andrew Lo of MIT on his new book, Adaptive Markets. And then we did a very large event, over 300 people attended for an event on the blockchain and the future of everything. This is our third event, and I'm sure it's going to be equally as good as the previous two. In the fall, we are also planning to sponsor another event featuring Howard Marks, the founder of Oaktree Capital. That's going to be very exciting. So our partnership with the museum is a natural, if you think about it. We're both focused on financial education. The museum's mandate is very broad, while the Gabelli Center's is quite focused. We are focused on promoting value investing to our constituents, the Fordham community, faculty, students, the academic community, and investment professionals. We offer 3 value investing courses at the undergraduate level and several more at the graduate level. We think we are one of the very few universities that offer value investing courses on both dimensions, both levels. And I'm also pleased to acknowledge my partner at the center, Professor Shrish Chatterjee, who is also here. And we work together very much, putting everything together. Okay, so now let me introduce our speaker. Larry Cunningham is a professor of law at Georgetown University, where he is the founding faculty director of GW in New York, an intensive semester-long training program on Wall Street for students eager to practice corporate law at the highest levels in New York City. He is also a consultant on corporate governance and has served on numerous corporate boards of both private and public companies, including Constellation Software. But his real identity is that he is the leading Buffettologist in the world. And he is the author of the famous book, Essays of Warren Buffett, which is in its 4th edition and was required reading for my students, by the way, Larry. And also, he is the author of Berkshire Beyond Buffett, which he published about 2 or 3 years ago. And his brand new book, The Warren Buffett Shareholder, which he co-edited with his wife, Stephanie Kuba, who's right here. So we have both authors with us this evening. So anyway, please welcome Larry Cunningham.
Thank you, Jim, for that delightful welcome, and thanks to all of you for joining us. My wife, Stephanie, and I are delighted to be here. We're always honored to be guests of the Gabelli Center and Fordham Business School. And thanks very much to our good friend Jim Kelly. We're delighted to be back at the Museum of American Finance. Always a pleasure to join this group, and thanks to David Cowan, the president, and to Kristen Aguilera, the deputy director, for your hospitality. We're also grateful for our readers, without whom this whole thing would be meaningless. And for a book like this, which is a collaboration of 43 different authors, we are very, very grateful to them. And one of them is here tonight, and it is Max Sykes, who, not coincidentally, is a senior research analyst at Gabelli. And Mac's boss, I'm not sure if that's how you describe him, but Mario Gabelli very kindly offered an endorsement of the book that's on the screen there, and he hits a very important aspect of the book when he talks about no other company having their shareholders team up to write a book about the experience. And we led this team because our thesis is that the Warren Buffett shareholder is as important to the future of Berkshire Hathaway as is whoever is named as Warren Buffett's successor. With Warren approaching 90 and Charlie Munger nearing 100, all the talk at Berkshire of the past decade or two have been about who will succeed these mavens as chairman and CEO and as vice chairman. Earlier this year, the board elevated to the vice chairman position both Greg Abel and Ajit Jain, long seen as probable successors to Warren. They are excellent choices, but they will need the kinds of shareholders that Buffett has attracted over the past couple of decades. This is a very specific type of shareholder, one that understands the very unique characteristics of Berkshire culture, especially its long time horizon, its opportunistic acquisition model, and its commitments to permanence, autonomy, and decentralization. While the quality of managerial succession is essential to Berkshire's continued prosperity, the quality of ownership will be vital too. Our book was born in that spirit, and it flows from my other work on Buffett and Berkshire that Jim kindly referred to, which has been an effort to discern the Berkshire culture and to collate Warren's philosophy. I started that work way back in 1996 when Berkshire was a very different company and Warren was not a household name. He was known to sophisticated investors, but not widely known beyond that. And Berkshire was more of an investment fund than an operating company. And I've given you there some basic facts from the period. And thought leaders generally dismissed Warren's ideas on investing, on governance, and certainly on culture. I saw deep wisdom in his ideas, and so decided to host a conference about them and to publish a collection of them organized as the Essays of Warren Buffett that Jim referred to, now in its 4th edition. We updated it every 5 years or so. Starting in 1998, we sold that book at the Berkshire annual meeting, back then at a card table outside the jewelry store adjacent to the meeting, and then it was the only book sold at the meeting back then. We sold 1,000 on that day alone, and over the past 22 years we've sold nearly 1 million copies in a dozen languages. The Buffett philosophy proved influential, certainly on educating a generation of investors. And companies, some of them at least, increasingly dabble with autonomy and decentralization. And he's long advocated these ideas, and he's practiced them and implemented them at Berkshire in the past 2 decades as he built it into a galactic conglomerate. Here are the comparative statistics then and now. Warren is widely known and deserves all the credit he gets as an outstanding investor, but his ideas on management, and especially corporate culture, remain underappreciated. The world is still prone to centralized internal control and short-termism. Warren says Berkshire's culture is the key to its long-term success, and it's that assertion that I explore in the other book Jim referenced, Berkshire Beyond Buffett, that I published in 2014. I wrote that book because as Warren turned 80, people panicked about what would happen to his company after he was gone. So many people thought Berkshire is a one-man show. Warren always said the culture will hold it together after he leaves the scene, but never articulated exactly what that culture meant. So with his permission, I interviewed most of the CEOs and articulated what that culture was and showed, and I think convinced most people, of its sustaining power. Those 2 books are the inspiration for the current one that Stephanie and I did. The Warren Buffett Shareholder Stories from Inside the Berkshire Hathaway Annual Meeting. So we build on Buffett's philosophy and the Berkshire culture and then adopt a new focus on the shareholders and the annual meeting, where this philosophy and this culture are celebrated every year. The book illuminates who the shareholders are, both the individuals who've written the pieces that they've contributed and the rest of the body as a group. The essays are by many very distinguished people who are pictured here. It's an amazing group of people. Virtually all have been attending the Berkshire meeting for decades, quite a few of them for 3 decades. Collectively, they've participated in the Berkshire meeting 750 times. One of my favorite statistics in the book. We invited them to share their reflections on why they go every year, what they get, what they give, why other people go, what it all means to Berkshire in the past and for the future. We've got an amazing group of essays in this group memoir that is really inspired by the traditions that have gone forward and a sense of how important they are to the future. Just a little biography. Obviously, I cannot elaborate on every one of these amazing people, but here's a sense of who they are. Together, they've written 55 books. By 16 of them are published book authors, and I've got their 16 book covers on the upper right. They manage a lot of money. They're leaders of 16 noted firms. I've put the logos underneath the book covers. They include 3 Berkshire CEOs, 2 current or former law partners of Charlie Munger, 6 university professors, plus 5 thought leaders of other learning organizations, 2 prominent journalists from the Berkshire Beat, and 3 booksellers who probably know more about the reading habits of this cohort than anyone, even Facebook. It's an amazing, luminous group, and they are investors, and together, and they concentrate in Berkshire stock, most of them, and together this group owns more Berkshire stock than any other shareholder other than Warren and just a few others. Together, the stories they tell, each one riveting, insightful, thoughtful, and powerful, that's just a little early, is a picture of the Berkshire shareholder. And it epitomizes what we call the Warren Buffett shareholder. And they've been so important to Berkshire's past success and so important to its future. They're an integral part of the fabric of the company. And so I just want to briefly review what that fabric is. And that's this next picture. It's a complicated company on its face. Here's a map showing just the main subsidiaries, 60 direct subsidiaries. They're all over the country. They're in every industry imaginable, all different, all diverse, all facing different kinds of problems, operational, product, managerial, geographic, and everything else. They're also headquartered, many of them abroad. Berkshire looks like this. It has this diversity because its acquisition strategy is opportunistic. It doesn't focus on a particular industry or particular sector. Its acquisition criteria have been published since 1986, and they're listed there on the left side. They're very general, and they've stayed the same the whole time, except for earnings, which have increased from $5 million back then to $75 million in the past decade. Berkshire also makes commitments to the sellers of businesses it acquires. The first and most important is permanence. Berkshire promises to hold the companies it buys forever and not sell them, no matter how badly they perform, so long as they have decent cash flows and no labor unrest. Berkshire hasn't sold a subsidiary in 40 years, even those that struggle. Berkshire's time horizon is infinite. Berkshire also commits to autonomy, leaving existing managers in place and in charge. This is both an advantage that sellers prize and also an essential element of Warren's philosophy. Decisions should be made by the people closest to the issue, he thinks. As a result, Berkshire is extremely decentralized. Each subsidiary is self-contained, all the traditional corporate functions are down there, and each subsidiary defines its own departments. Sellers of businesses value Berkshire's commitments of permanence, autonomy, and decentralization, and some of them sell to Berkshire at a discount to intrinsic value or to rival bids to obtain these intangibles. The Berkshire discount means that Berkshire recovers its acquisition outlays faster than rivals do, which creates a space to enable holding struggling subsidiaries forever and provides a cushion against other losses. Warren sets the example of leanness in corporate structure at corporate headquarters. The organizational structure is so simple that they don't have an organizational chart. But if they did, it would look a little bit like this. Warren brags that he has 25 employees in his Omaha headquarters for a sprawling conglomerate that together employs 377,000 and generates $220 billion in revenue. Formal oversight of the subsidiaries focuses on the financial side. 5 of the 6 officers in Omaha have that beat: chief financial officer, internal audit, and so on. The other officer oversees the outside law firm that handles most of Berkshire's acquisitions and securities work. In 2018, as I said, the Berkshire board promoted 2 vice chairs of the board. Ajit Jain, who's been at the company since the mid-'80s, is now overseeing all of the insurance operations. And then Greg Abel, who's been there since 1998, oversees all the other businesses. Their most important jobs, Warren's in the old days, Ajit and Greg's now, is getting trustworthy CEOs to run all these 60-plus direct subsidiaries, to replace the incumbent managers as those people age and retire. Warren has been very successful at this. Not perfect. He's picked some managers disappointed, but mostly he's found managers of high character and strong talent. And Greg and Ajit have done the same in their units. And the Berkshire model helps attract and retain talented, trustworthy managers. Autonomy actually promotes accountability. And over and over, as I've interviewed Berkshire CEOs over the years, they've emphasized this, and I just give 3 quotes from 3 of them to illustrate. Jim Weber, who runs the Brooks Running Shoe Company, said, "I've never had so much autonomy in my life and in my career, and I've never felt so accountable." Bruce Whitman, who contributed to the book, says, "Warren trusts me so much, I'm even more careful with his money than I am with my own." And Bruce is a very thrifty, careful guy. And finally, Tom Menente, another contributor to the book who just retired from MyTech, says, "Berkshire and Buffett give me so much autonomy that it's easy for me to give my team autonomy." That's the culture that Warren built, and Ajit and Greg know it, and they will continue it. This quote from Warren earlier this year says a lot. They've been here for decades. That attests to their long-term view, and their blood, Berkshire's blood flows through their veins. That's a very emotive statement there. The character of each man matches his talents. In Berkshire blood, character and talent dovetail with the culture of autonomy, where character is essential, and decentralization, where talent is a must. And these 2 guys live those Berkshire virtues. I'll just give you an example of what Greg has done at Berkshire Energy. Looks a lot like what Warren has done at Berkshire. He's been running this company since 1998. It began as Mid-American Energy, that small part on the left, and since then he's led 15 major acquisitions to build this conglomerate. He generates more than $22 billion in revenue with 27 people at headquarters and 23,000 people employed across the various units, 5 utilities, 2 pipelines, numerous renewables, and thousands of real estate brokerages. As he made these acquisitions, some centralization crept in, some bureaucracy and middle management layers snuck in, but starting 5 years ago, he aggressively decentralized BH Energy, pushing all these functions down. So you got a very small head office. There's a general counsel there. There's a head of HR, a couple of labor union specialists who can have a view across the conglomerate to help with unionized labor negotiations, and there's a little bit of central branding, but otherwise, and there's internal audit, of course, everything else is pushed down. It's a very Berkshire kind of operation. And Ajit Jain, he's long run one of Berkshire's 3 most important insurance divisions with 600 employees. In 2016, on the retirement of the CEO of another big insurance division, Jen Ray, instead of Warren hiring a successor to that fellow, he expanded Ajit's purview to oversee Jen Ray in addition to his own portfolio. But typical of Berkshire, he took this oversight mostly by delegation. He appointed as CEO of Jen Ray, Kara Rogel, who had been his number 2 for 15 years at the reinsurance division. So Kara enjoys wide autonomy over Jen Ray. And all the other CEOs of the insurance companies at Geico and the niche insurance companies are experiencing the same thing now that Ajit is overseeing them, the typical delegated, hands-off, decentralized model. So Ajit and Greg really do have Berkshire blood in their veins. They exude this culture. They are very worthy successors to Warren and Charlie. And that brings us back to the shareholders.